So in this video, we're going to learn how to sketch quadratics using everything we've learned before. There's 5 steps to this. So you remember the important points. First one we learned about was the y-intercept. So we need to find that point. And our y-intercept is when it cuts the y-axis. And it cuts the y-axis when x equals 0. So these are how we're going to solve for them. Okay. Then we need to find the roots. And that is when y equals 0, because it's cutting the x-axis, so it's the opposite way. Then we need to find the axis of symmetry. And then we need to find the turning point. And then we can sketch. Okay, so 5 steps. So let's get the y-intercept first. So we'll be able to find the y-intercept when x equals 0. So all we need to do is substitute x equals 0 into the equation. Zero squared is 0, minus 0 is 0, minus 12 is negative 12. So the y-intercept is going to be 0 minus 12. Okay? Now let's find the roots. So when y equals 0, so it's going to be when x squared minus x minus 12 equals 0, because y now equals 0. And now that this quadratic is equal to 0, we can factorize it and solve it. So, first times last. Needs to be negative x, so we're going to have negative and positive there. So we're going to get x squared plus 3x minus 4x minus 12 equals 0. X bracket x plus 3 minus 4 bracket x plus 3, and then x plus 3 and x minus 4 equals 0. So split the brackets, get x plus 3 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0, which tells us that x is going to equal negative 3, x is going to equal 4. Okay, which means that our roots are going to be at negative 3, 0 and 4, 0. So that's our coordinates of our roots. So that's the y-intercept, and these are the roots. Now, axis of symmetry. Remember what I said, quadratics are symmetrical. So to find the axis of symmetry, we just need to find the midpoint of these roots. So it's moving on from, we need the roots to find the axis of symmetry. And how do we find the midpoint? Well, it's just take the two roots, negative 3 and 4, add them, and divide them by 2. Negative 3 plus 4 is 1, 1 over 2 is a half. So the axis of symmetry will be at the coordinate when x equals a half. Because it is a vertical line on the graph, it's always going to be x equals a half. And then the last thing we do is find the turning point. And we do that. So we needed the roots to get the axis of symmetry. Well, we need the axis of symmetry to get the turning point, because the turning point is on the axis of symmetry. So to do that, all we need to do is y equals x squared minus x minus 12. Substitute that in. So it's y equals a half squared minus a half minus 12. 1 squared equals 1, 2 squared equals a quarter, 4. So a half squared is a quarter, minus a half minus 12. So then we need to make sure they all have common denominators. Okay. So 1 quarter minus 2 quarters is negative 1 quarters, minus 48 is negative 49 quarters. It's not the most easy of numbers to deal with, but it's okay, which is going to be negative 12 and a quarter. So our turning point will be a half negative 12 1/4. So now we can sketch it. So we've got a graph. Doesn't need to be perfect. -3 0, 4 0, axis of symmetry at a half, y-intercept at 0, -12, and then our turning point at a half, -12 1/4, so about here. Like that. It's not the neatest, but you get the idea. Okay, 5 steps: y-intercept, roots, axis of symmetry, turning point, and then sketch it. Okay, so I'll pause that there in case you're wanting to pause the video at this point, because I'm going to do another example. I'll hold it. Okay, so do another one. So remember the 5 steps: y-intercept, roots, axis of symmetry, turning point, turning point, and then sketch. Okay, so for the y-intercept, make x equals 0. Two times 0 squared is 0, minus 3 times 0 is 0, so that's -2. So it's at 0, -2. So now we need the roots. So that's going to be when y equals 0, sorry. So we factorize. 2 times -2 is -4. So it's going to have to be -4 plus 1. And then we can factorize within these. So we get 2x, x minus 2, and then plus 1, x minus 2. We don't actually need to factorize that one, but then we still need to have something to put into the final bracket, so it's going to be 1 over 0. So we're going to have x minus 2 and 2x plus 1 equals 0. So we're going to have x minus 2 equals 0 and 2x plus 1 equals 0. So x is going to equal 2 and x is going to equal -1/2. Okay. So our roots are going to be 2 0 and -1/2 0. Axis of symmetry. So it's going to be the midpoint of 2 and -1/2. So we're going to do x equals 2 plus -1/2 all divided by 2. So 2 plus -1/2 is going to be 2 minus 1/2, which is 1.5. So it's going to be 3 over 2 divided by 2, which is going to be 3/4. Okay. So our axis of symmetry is going to be x equals 3/4, and so our turning point will be this value substituted into the original equation. Okay. So we're going to get 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16. 12/4 minus 2. 2 times 9 is 18 over 16. Now let's make them into the same denominator. So 4 times 4 is 16, so 12 times 4 is going to be 48 over 16 minus So that's going to be over 16 as well. So it's going to be 32. 18 minus 48 is going to be negative 30. Minus 32 is going to be negative 62 over 16, which is going to be 16, 32, 48. So it's going to be negative 3 and 14 sixteenths, which is going to be negative 3 and 7 eighths. So our turning point is going to be at 3/4, negative 3 and 7 eighths. And all we need to do is sketch it. Y-intercept, 0, negative 2. Roots, 2, 0. Negative 1/2, 0. Axis of symmetry. And then 3/4, negative 3 and 7 eighths. So let's say it's about here. And then we can sketch the quadratic. Like that. Okay, so there's our first 5 steps, and then that's how we can sketch quadratics. And I'll leave that paused for a second if you wanted to take a picture. See, that was sketching quadratics. It's a big long video and it's very complicated, but if you can understand how to do this, then it'll mean that when it comes to doing any calculations with quadratics, you'll be good at them.